Hello, I'm Esther Githuyu. Welcome to Africa 54. Here's what's coming up. Funeral ceremonies honoring the life and legacy of former U.S. President Jimmy Carter conclude in his home state of Georgia. Donald Trump is set to be sworn in January 20th as the only U.S. president with felony convictions. And a Washington, D.C.-based visual artist blends Ethiopian art forms with contemporary techniques to explore themes of identity, culture, and tradition. All this and much more coming up on today's Africa 54. Six days of official funeral ceremonies honoring the life and legacy of former U.S. President Jimmy Carter concluded in his home state of Georgia. VOA's Ken Faribault has more.
In a rare moment uniting all five living presidents, the country said goodbye to the 39th President of the United States, Jimmy Carter, in official state ceremonies at the National Cathedral in Washington. President Joe Biden delivered the eulogy for a man he has known since supporting his 1976 campaign for the presidency.
I was the first senator outside of Georgia, maybe the first senator, to endorse his candidacy for president. It was an endorsement based on what I believe is Jimmy Carter's enduring attribute: character. Character. Character.
The son of President Gerald Ford, Carter's Republican rival for the White House in 1976, also delivered a eulogy his late father wrote to honor his successor.
Honesty and truth-telling were synonymous with the name Jimmy Carter.
Jason Carter paid tribute to his grandfather's legacy as the founder of the nonprofit Carter Center, which fights disease, builds hope, and wages peace around the world.
Essentially, he eradicated a disease with love and respect. He waged peace with love and respect. He led this nation with love and respect.
A somber day that began in Washington ended in Carter's home state of Georgia, which welcomed him back on a final journey home to the town of Plains.
Because this little town shaped him.
Dot Paget, who worked on Jimmy Carter's Peanut Brigade of volunteers in his 1976 campaign for the White House, joined hundreds lining the streets of Plains to say goodbye to the man who was more than a former president to them.
I've spent a lot of time with Rosa and Jimmy in this town, and I am so grateful that at this date and this time that I can be back and be with the family.
President Carter put Plains in the spotlight for most of his life, and his final journey through the town he called home for a century attracted media and visitors from around the world.
It is a sad occasion, and America and the world will be less well off because of the passing of Jimmy Carter.
Former member of the Parliament of the United Kingdom, Sir Simon Burns, traveled from England to say goodbye to his friend Jimmy Carter.
I think as the casket passed, the finality of the situation really struck home. This was the last time we were going to see President Carter.
Following a private funeral service at Maranatha Baptist Church, Jimmy Carter's hearse made one last procession through Plains, taking his casket to the edge of town, to the modest home he and Rosalind built in the 1960s, the place they called home after leaving the White House, and where they are reunited under a willow tree near the pond they fished in for much of their post-presidential life. Ken Faribault, VOA News, Plains, Georgia.
Donald Trump will be sworn in January 20th as the only U.S. president with felony convictions. A New York judge on Friday sentenced Donald Trump to unconditional release. VOA senior Washington correspondent Caroline Presutti has more.
President-elect Donald Trump had gone through every appeal and even petitioned the U.S. Supreme Court to block sentencing in his highest-profile court case. But late Thursday, the High Court rejected his request to delay sentencing. The once-and-future president was found guilty last year of 34 counts of falsifying business records to hide hush money payments to a porn star.
This was a disgrace.
Political analysts like Shannon Bo O'Brien of the University of Texas say this case was personal to Trump.
He doesn't like to admit fault. He doesn't like to admit weaknesses or shortcomings.
New York Supreme Court Judge Juan Merchan, who presided over the trial, had denied a delay, but also said he would not sentence the former president to jail.
I think the message that really is conveyed here is that no one is above the law, and that the process has played out, and it's going to now bring it to an end.
In a second and third case, a Trump-appointed judge this week temporarily blocked the Justice Department from releasing final reports from special counsel Jack Smith. The cases, both dismissed, involve the storage of classified documents and election interference with the January 6th attack on the U.S. Capitol. This week, the president-elect reiterated his belief that Smith was appointed illegally.
He was thrown off the case in disgrace. Why should he be allowed to write a fake report? It'll only be a fake report.
Special counsels are required to file summary reports. The U.S. Attorney General said he would release Smith's report on the January 6th uprising at the Capitol, making that public could hamper Trump's efforts to pardon those arrested.
If a lot of this comes to light, that a lot of this was planned and a lot of these activities were malicious and that they were criminal, he is giving people a free pass on criminal activity.
The fourth case deals with Georgia election interference. The prosecutor was removed due to an improper romantic relationship with an employee. So the case is at a standstill until it is dismissed or until another prosecutor is assigned.
I think the voters are actually hoping that this whole thing is brought to an end, and that now we can begin anew with a second Trump term.
And that term starts on Monday, January 20th.
It feels great.
Carolyn Presutti, VOA News.
The horrific wildfires in Southern California have killed at least 10 and are continuing to spread, threatening thousands of homes and forcing evacuations of more than 100,000 people. Among those is Elena Nays, a resident of West Hollywood, who evacuated her home just days after moving in. She spoke with VOA's Anthony Labruto about the fires that are wreaking havoc across Los Angeles.
So I just moved to LA yesterday. I was in my apartment for about 10 minutes. I moved everything out of my car, and then the Sunset Fire happened. So the Sunset Fire was in the Hollywood Hills area, and I'm basically right at the foot of the hill in East Hollywood. And I wasn't in an evacuation status yet, but it was a little bit too close for comfort, and I did not want to have to deal with any of the traffic in case we were in an evacuation, because if it crossed the hill, it would have been very bad, and it would have been a very crazy, hectic traffic journey. So I came here, I'm right now in Hermosa Beach, which is in the South Bay. So not under a red flag warning, not under an evacuation zone, no threats of fire at the moment here. So I drove here to a friend who very thankfully let me stay at her house. Good now. I know basically everybody I know who lives in LA is evacuated. They've left. I have friends who are in Koreatown, which is a little bit more south of where I was. They left. My job is in Glendale, where I think the Eaton fire is right now. So everyone is leaving. I think even if you and your actual house or apartment was not impacted, you know somebody in the city who was. So very scary. A lot going on.
That was Elena Nays speaking to VOA's Anthony Labruto. Pope Francis is condemning Israel's military campaign in Gaza. The pontiff calls the humanitarian crisis, quote, very serious and shameful. In a yearly address to diplomats from about 180 countries delivered on his behalf by an aide because he is recovering from a cold, Francis referred to deaths caused by winter cold in Gaza, where there is almost no electricity. The war in Gaza began in October 2023 with Hamas' attack on Israel, in which the militants killed 1,200 people and took about 250 other hostage. There are still about 100 hostages being held in Gaza. Israel's counteroffensive in Gaza has killed more than 46,000 Palestinians, according to the territory's health ministry, which does not distinguish between combatants and civilians in its count. The International Organization for Migration says that nearly 15 million people in Sudan have been displaced since the beginning of the war. Over 30% of the population in Sudan has been displaced either internally or across borders into neighboring nations, making it the largest displacement crisis in the world, according to an IOM report. The internal displacement number has surpassed 11.5 million, and another 3.3 million people have traveled across borders to flee the fighting. The total number of internally displaced persons in Sudan increased by 27% in 2024. The majority of these individuals come from Khartoum and Darfur, with an estimated 53% being children under the age of 18. Sudan now hosts approximately 15% of the world's total internally displaced persons. The U.S. Supreme Court is fast-tracking oral arguments on a challenge by the Chinese company ByteDance, the owner of TikTok, to a new law that would ban the social media platform on grounds of national security. VOA Steve Herman has the details.
TikTok, the most popular social media platform in the United States, has become a part of American culture. But its Chinese ownership and Beijing's potential access to all that personal data and the ability to shape public opinion for its American users prompted Congress to ban it.
The bill is passed, and without the objection, the motion to reconsider is laid on the table.
That happened despite TikTok's chief executive officer, Shouzi Chu, appealing to his platform's American users to fight against the legislation.
Protect your constitutional rights. Make your voices heard.
Barring a reprieve by the U.S. Supreme Court, ByteDance, the Chinese company that owns TikTok, is to lose access to its largest market on January 19th, notes University of Minnesota Associate Law Professor Alan Rosenstein.
Assuming the Supreme Court upholds the law, unless the Trump administration can find some workaround, which I'm doubtful they'll be able to, the choice is either sell TikTok or face a ban in the United States.
Both President Joe Biden and President-elect Donald Trump had backed the ban. But Trump expressed a recent change of heart after his campaign videos during last year's election performed well on TikTok.
They brought me a chart, and it was a record, and it was so beautiful to see. And as I looked at it, I said, maybe we got to keep this sucker around a little while.
The U.S. Supreme Court will listen to the social media company's appeal on Friday. The justices will weigh the national security argument against the constitutional guarantees of free speech for ByteDance's American subsidiary and its estimated 170 million users in the United States, explains Professor Rosenstein.
That's one dimension of the conflict, but in another sense, it's also a fight within free speech itself, because one thing the government is arguing is that one of the dangers of having Chinese ownership of TikTok is that the Chinese government would be able to manipulate the algorithm and therefore distort the speech environment itself.
Canadian investor Kevin O'Leary says he has informed President-elect Trump that he's nearing a deal to buy the U.S. assets of TikTok that would save it from being banned.
I wanted to let him know, as well as others in his cabinet, that we're doing this and we're going to need their help.
Trump has asked the Supreme Court to put the case on hold so he can negotiate a sale of the platform following his second inauguration on January 20th, the day after the ban is set to go into effect. Steve Herman, VOA News, Washington.
We're excited to hear what you think about Africa 54 and all our VOA Africa programs on our website at voaafrica.com. Still to come, a visual artist blends Ethiopian art forms with contemporary techniques. We'll be right back.
The spread of misinformation and disinformation is one of the biggest challenges society faces today. This is increasingly undermining human rights, including the right to basic information, non-discrimination, or political participation. On this week's edition of Our Voices, we will explore the need for robust and reliable fact-checking on the continent and how Africa's indigenous fact-checking community is countering misinformation by sharing the truth. Join the conversation each week right here on Our Voices.
Health, wellness, sport, beauty, medical breakthroughs. Healthy Living cares about your well-being. What are the main health concerns in Africa and around the world? Find out the latest on coronavirus. Connect with our experts and ask them questions.
How long does the virus stay?
Join me, Linor Moudou, in Washington, every week on Healthy Living, right here on VOA.
You're watching Africa 54 from the Voice of America headquarters here in Washington, D.C. In other news, Africa's agriculture ministers and more than 2,000 delegates are meeting in Uganda to discuss the best way to transform the continent's food production systems. The ministers are hoping to agree on a 10-year action plan to reduce Africa's reliance on food from outside the continent and adapt its farming practices to climate change and modern technology. And the French Interior Minister is accusing Algeria of, quote, trying to humiliate France after the North African country refused to admit one of its nationals who is being deported. The influencer was arrested in the French city of Montpellier on charges of inciting violence in videos he posted on social media. France and Algeria have a turbulent relationship. Algeria broke away from Paris in 1962 after a brutal war. The Computer Electronics Show in Las Vegas ends on Sunday. Technology companies, industries, executives, and entrepreneurs are attending the event featuring the latest advancements in artificial intelligence, vehicle technology, robotics, and more. Tina Trin reports from Las Vegas.
CES, the massive consumer electronics trade show that takes place every year in Las Vegas, kicked off this week with a keynote from NVIDIA CEO Jensen Huang. NVIDIA is a U.S. computing company that had a blockbuster year in 2024, with a market capitalization of $3 trillion and share prices that surged 171%. It's also at the center of the artificial intelligence boom.
Agentic AI. AIs that can perceive, reason, plan, and act. And then the next phase, some of which we'll talk about tonight, physical AI.
Leaders at NVIDIA say the latest AI models are better able to reason and can even train and test themselves.
Potentially, the AI can talk to itself or talk to other AIs, and just like how humans in a team can challenge each other, challenge each other's assumptions, test each other, grade each other with their results, AIs can do the same thing.
AI agents may become a firm's new digital workforce if given business-specific data and predefined parameters, Huang says.
The IT department of every company is going to be the HR department of AI agents in the future.
What Wong calls physical AI takes things a step further, interpreting data to carry out tasks and functions in the real world. Automakers are exploring the field as cars advance from driver-assisted technologies to fully autonomous vehicles. Their success is aided by AI predicting real-world scenarios that can be, well, unpredictable.
I don't think that there's a fundamental issue of them not being safe. It's how do you interact with the rest of the environment? And that still has some development to go. It's working pretty well in most cases. You're going to have challenges to meet, but human drivers aren't 100% safe either.
Honda unveiled 2 prototype electric vehicles, currently without self-driving functionality. One company vice president stresses the importance of remembering who ultimately benefits from advances in technology.
Honda has always pursued human-centric vehicle development, and I think that is all the more important in this era of software-defined vehicles and autonomous driving.
Human-centric technology working hand-in-hand with AI agents, challenging the relationship between humans and machines. Tina Trin, VOA News, Las Vegas.
Aklilu Temesgen, a Washington, D.C.-based visual artist, blends Ethiopian art forms with contemporary techniques to explore themes of identity, culture, and tradition. In a conversation with VOA's Jackson Bungani, Aklilu shared how his work weaves traditional West and East African motifs into his paintings to tell the story that connects the past to the present. Jackson joins us now to tell us more. Hello, Jackson.
Hello, Esther. Originally from Ethiopia, Aklilu has been working from his Washington, D.C. studio for over a decade. He tells me that he uses his art to pay homage to his country's rich artistic history and to shed light on social issues. He also invites viewers to reflect on the intersections of culture and time. Let's check it out. Aklilu creates his art in an upstairs studio in Washington, D.C., where he shares the space with fellow artists. He greets me warmly, proudly displaying both his completed pieces and those still in progress.
And this is my studio. Welcome again. I am from Ethiopia, from Africa, so currently residing in the United States, and trying to live within this culture at the same time thinking about my own culture, my past. So it's like trying to connect these two.
How do you balance traditional Ethiopian elements with modern influences in your artwork?
Yes, in my artwork, I am trying to study and also know more about the traditional Ethiopian paintings, the scrolls, magic scrolls. So I'm trying also to use those elements, those knowledge, into my current artwork that reflects me at this time. When I do it, it will be mine. At the same time, it reflects my time. So it's a kind of a process where I am still trying to know more about it, research more about it, and I'm still experimenting. My personal journey, I can say, as an Ethiopian who immigrated from, Ethiopia to the United States, I'm trying to assimilate the culture at the same time, looking back into my own ancestors, my own Ethiopian traditional art, African mask. So I am still on the gray area where I am trying to find myself. At the same time to connect with what currently I am living in, at the same time what my experiences and my past is. So I am still figuring out, that's where my art is born.
I see your work features a lot of rich symbolism. Can you explain some of the symbols you use in the artwork?
Yeah, most symbols that I use in my artworks are from Ethiopian paintings, the scroll magics, so the Ethiopian alphabet, and mostly I also use, the African masks, so how those elements are used, and still that I am searching and using those elements, to express myself. So this painting, the title of this painting is The Angel Face, and it depicts, it's acrylic on canvas, which is made in 2019. And this is one of the series that I'm working, trying to study the Ethiopian traditional art, the motifs, and what I've been is using on that element. So I am trying to depict, this is the face, the angel face from one of the Ethiopian traditional paintings, so that I can use it, trying to express myself using my own color. And also you can see the numbers that are written. I also don't put like, this is how I have to finish, but I let myself, my hand, my brain to exercise, to experiment on that, and the outcome, whatever comes, I'll be happy.
That was Ethiopian visual artist Aklilu Temesgen. Esther, back to you.
Jackson, I have a question for you.
Yes.
Is it a lucrative artwork here given the competition in Washington, D.C.?
That's a good question, Esther. Well, one of the things that is often overlooked about Washington, D.C., it's such a very artistic city, from the Smithsonian institutions to all these African artists and artists from diverse backgrounds that come to Washington, D.C. to kind of add to this tapestry. Aklilu obviously is from Ethiopia. He works in this space called the Crestaven Studios, which is kind of an art collective. And yes, they showcase their work, they sell their work. They're starting to gain traction in terms of how they can market their art, especially when they get these different, platforms.
Totally agree. Ethiopians are really doing well downtown here in Washington, D.C.
Absolutely.
Jackson, many thanks. Be sure to join Africa 54 each Friday for an art and entertainment report. And that's our show for today. Be sure to watch Africa 54 on our website at voaafrica.com. From all of us here in Washington, thanks for watching and have a great weekend.